Hello and welcome. You're listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Today we are talking about spoilers, how to dance around them in your work, when to finally share things, how to stay focused until you can spill the beans, and, oh, oops, that's a few too many spoilers already. Stick around and see what secrets lie within.
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Woo! Hello, and welcome to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Today we're going to be talking about spoilers, otherwise known as planned future events in a serialized story which will take place in chapters that haven't been released yet or haven't even been created. There's a lot of different attitudes surrounding spoilers out there. Some readers get angry if they perceive a story has been ruined for them, while others don't mind. Some creators freely share their upcoming plans, while others feel they must keep them secret, keep them safe. I'm Verathane. My pronouns are she, they, and my comics are Geralt and Witchwood.
I am Crispy. My pronouns are she, they, and I work on Ghost Junk Sickness.
I am Claire, also known as Clam. My pronouns are she, her, and I work on the webcomic Phantomarine.
And I'm Miranda. My pronouns are she, her, and I create the comics Into the Swell and Just One Bite.
Excellent. So, on our subject of spoilers and secrets and all these things that we must keep close to our chest, I'll start with the opening question. What is the difference between foreshadowing a plot point and spoiling it?
So, there's a huge difference with that. They're definitely not interchangeable as far as terms are concerned. Foreshadowing is when a writer get some elements in your story, some nice little bites to eat as a reader to pick up on where the plot's going to be going, either further along the line or a character development for someone particular. These aren't necessarily always going to be tools that you need to understand as a reader to understand the whole plot. But they're really, really good for rereadability of your story. And again, they're kind of like these quiet little moments that you can use to kind of flesh out a point further without being very explicit with saying it. And spoiling it on this half of the question is just, going out and kind of saying what is what as far as it goes in the story.
Yeah, I always think of foreshadowing kind of like if I have a big spoiler or even like a small spoiler, like there's certain scenes that I have that are not huge, like game-breaking things, but I still don't want to tell somebody, hey, this is going to happen. And, I want them to still be surprised, even if it's not a huge, plot point. But I usually think about it like I've got this thing that I'm heading towards, but I've got these little things, little subsets of like clues, whether it's visual or it's words, or I don't even know. Like there's so many different things that you can do, kind of organizing your thoughts around like, I know this is coming. I think I can drop some hints in the form of this or this or this, but you're not telling anybody this is what this means. It's totally fine to be like, yeah, you put it in there and then somebody can go back later and be like, oh my God, of course, it makes total sense. So for spoilers, I find that that's more, it's not even breadcrumbs at that point. It's a whole baguette. And I don't really like doing that if it's a particularly huge plot point. So yeah, I think organizing it in terms of just little tiny things you can drop that really make you feel happy as a writer and give a reader something to chew on.
I definitely agree. I feel like foreshadowing are the cookie crumbs that you find all around the house and you don't really think that they're a big deal until you find someone in the kitchen with a giant plate of cookies and a ton of cookie crumbs all over them, and it clicks and you realize that that's why you've been finding crumbs everywhere. I feel like for me, foreshadowing is just all those little moments throughout a story that you may not even notice. You may just think, "Oh, that's cool," and then throw it to the side, not thinking it's important until that aha moment when all of those little pieces come together and just everything becomes clear. I feel like spoilers are the aha moment without the aha. There's no build up, there's no surprise. You're just handed this moment and there isn't anything behind it to kind of emphasize it in a way.
Yeah, I feel like the for me the difference between the foreshadowing and like a spoiler is that the spoiler will be outside of the context of the story itself. Like the foreshadowing is what's built into the plot to build towards those future events that are going to be so cool. Like little a line of dialogue that might seem a bit unusual in context as the reader is going through it, but like they don't know what it means yet. And then when the plot point happens, they're like, "Oh, that's what that was about." But the spoiler is when you just accidentally see a page from 2 chapters in the future, and it just shows you, oh damn, that okay, I guess that is what it meant. Or when you're told about it in like a Twitter post, or the way that a lot of people kind of see spoilers is in the context of things like a Marvel movie or something, which gets leaked, and suddenly you all know the big twist, and everybody is kind of going into it already knowing what's going to happen. They have a they have pretty different vibes, but for me that's kind of where the distinction happens, is the foreshadowing is what's built in that you're supposed to experience in the entire story, whereas the spoiler is an external, it's something outside of the story itself that is being shown to you out of context that kind of leads you to make that conclusion without experiencing the story itself.
I really like how Miranda described it as the cookie crumb trailer to the aha moment. With that, the foreshadowing being used as the tool so that when you get to this moment that would be otherwise destroyed, spoiled, it's just so much more exciting and enticing as a reader to kind of just, I was there when the plot and the plans were laid down, and now that it all clicks together, this is very satisfying. Um, to see that come together.
It's so exciting when you have pieced these things together and gone through the whole story kind of as it was intended to be experienced, and
Mm-hmm.
you see that weird line of dialogue and it registers, and when you find out, you're like, oh, I noticed that.
Those
I was
moments
there.
are so good.
They
I love
are.
those moments so much.
You got to let the reader feel smart. It's
Yes.
part of the joy of experiencing a story.
Mm-hmm.
So, second question. Do you try to keep your story's upcoming events away from readers until your comic has reached that point publicly? And, why or why not?
It always depends because, there's always certain degrees of spoilers. There could be the story shattering spoilers that would just kind of take away the mystery that you're leading up to if you were just be like, oh yeah, the ending of Ghost Junk Sickness is X. And then, I guess people would still be intrigued, but not with a certain spoiler that can do that better, which would be like something that's more revealing about a character to look forward to, or maybe just an event that's something to look forward to, but not necessarily taking away the mystery of the plot. One thing that we actually used to do when when we used to update Ghost Junk Sickness is our chapters are long. They usually range from 60 to 80 pages. That's kind of like our normal, with it definitely reaching up to pages of 120. And with how webcomics are kind of updated, we do the 2 pages a week kind of thing. Like, it's kind of slow to get there. So what we used to do is we would write summaries, as well as post future pages and be like, in this chapter, we're going to experience XYZ. The characters are going to get to this point, and now you as a reader are going to find out how we get there. And I think that's just a good tool for the long run for a reader to kind of look forward to things. Because again, webcomics are really slow kind of updating depending on your schedule. But I think that if you give them a certain kind of intrigue, I think that's a good way. There are good ways to use spoilers, and I think that's one of the good ways to use them.
So it depends. I don't really. There's certain spoilers that are so small that I'm kind of like I would rather tell people, like if people are really hung up on some sort of a fact, as like a they're trying to mull things over or solve a mystery, and I'm like, I no, I can tell you this thing, like it's not consequential to the story, it doesn't mean too much, and it even might be something for them to look forward to. Like in Phantom Marine, I know a lot of people were not sure if Phaedra's mom was alive or if Phaedra's mom was evil or something like that. And I'm like, that would be interesting, but I do kind of want to tell you, like, nah, she's fine and she's alive. And it could be something where, yeah, they can look forward to it and not really circle the drain in terms of that sort of particular story element. I like if people come to me with specific questions, I do kind of do like a mental check of like, does this make them, yeah, learn things too quickly, or is it, not fun for them to know, or is it kind of fun for them to know? So I think I do kind of that check over before I say anything. And I try to keep that to a minimum. I know there are some things that I've told people that I have now changed, but yeah, it's nothing huge, nothing at all. So it depends. It really depends on whether I see people really sticking around on certain twists or things, and I just want to kind of take them aside and be like, you don't need to worry about this. It's okay. Like there's other things for you to look for. So I wonder if that's a kindness or not. I do think about that a lot. But yeah, I kind of do. I do a check to see, what is the magnitude of this spoiler. Yeah.
That's a
Makes
really good
sense.
way to look at it. I could just double check before anything goes out. I know in the beginning, I really wanted to keep everything secret about my comic, from the mundane to the really big spoilers, because I felt that would encourage people to read the comic because they didn't know what was happening, so they would have to go to the comic and read it. Um, my story doesn't really have a lot of spoilers as is. So as I've been working on it, and I realized that when you work on comics a lot, the art and the content that you have to share is going to be a spoiler of some magnitude, whether it's a tiny thing or a big thing. You just have to get over it and be okay with sharing some of your story. So I obviously try not to spoil anything that's too big or life changing or changes the outlook of the entire story, like Clam said. Just checking before I share anything to make sure that it's not going to affect how the reader is reading the story.
Yeah, that's all very makes a lot of sense. I've gone in a couple of different ways on this question because my first comic, Geralt, I started like 14 years ago now, and I finished it in 2018. And over the course of working on that comic, I went through this whole journey of like having only a little bit of the story done and everything as kind of a big hazy future plan. And then as I got to those moments, like less and less of it was like upcoming, and I was starting to be in the position of looking at my existing story and realizing that for new readers it's possible for me to spoil them on something that I already drew in the process of like showing them my story. So I kind of had to control what I was, what I was doing publicly, I guess. Um, there were, especially early on, I found that I was trying not to talk about upcoming plot events because the more I worked on the comic, the more I realized that I was changing those things as I went through it, and I didn't want to tell people about something that I had thought at the time might be coming up and then I changed my mind on it, but the readers all still had this like incorrect older view of what was going to happen. So that was kind of something that I ended up going through. And then after I finished it, I'm starting the whole process over again with Witchwood, my new comic, and now I'm kind of categorizing things by like small and big spoilers. Small things being like, here's the outfit that a character is going to be wearing in the next chapter. Like, it doesn't really tell them that much. It is technically a future event, but it doesn't mean anything. Although, if like, maybe the outfit had like a sigil on it or something that is a symbol of an allegiance change or some big plot event, I would probably keep that secret because it becomes a a bigger spoiler in that case, which might reveal something about plot points that I don't necessarily want people to know about just yet if they're related to something that is key to the suspense of the story or to the intrigue that I want to be building. So I try not to reveal anything that'll explicitly confirm something that I really want to save for maximum reader impact when I get there. And that will lead us to our third question, which is, what do you do if someone correctly guesses an upcoming plot point?
I think pat yourself on the back, honestly, for the first thing when I think of that stuff, because I think oftentimes people are really, really afraid um, when people kind of guess where the story is going as a bad thing. And it's like, no, 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 no. If people understand where your story is going, that's good writing on you. You're leaving the correct information for them to put these pieces together, and it's just as much as like the plot getting to the point is as enjoyable, or it is enjoyable, so should picking up subtleties and the clues and stuff like that that you lay on the ground for the reader to get there. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if people can guess, where it's going. Um, Maybe it's a little tougher if you did have a mystery comic that was extremely shrouded in said mystery, and it was just like, okay, this is murder mystery, oh my goodness, and someone's just like, bam, that person did it because based on this, that, and the other thing. It could be like, okay, and again, like I guess the same instance if someone said, bam, it's this, but based on no evidence, like I kind of just, I shrug that off. That's kind of nothing when it's based on nothing. They're just kind of, saying anything, right? Um, but you can definitely, I don't know. I feel accomplished when your story is going in a direction and the readers pick up on that. I don't think there's anything worse than coming into a story that wants to leave clues and I don't know where it's going and I don't know how to theorize. I don't know how to actually think of a spoiler. I think that that's something that I would be worrying about as a writer, as opposed to, people guessing it. Embrace that. I would definitely do that.
I actually have a ritual when somebody guesses something correctly in Phantom Marine. First, I celebrate internally because I'm just like, this is the best thing. They figured it out, and sometimes I am actually scared that they figured it out with barely any information in some cases. Um, but I also, if I see the person, has left a message with this particular guess, I will screen cap it and I put it in a little folder. And I'm just like, when this spoiler comes, I want to message this person if they're still around, and I want to tell them that they were right. Because like it's just so like people. I'm really floored by how many of my readers actually treat it like a puzzle. They treat it like a mystery, and I never really went into making a comic to do that sort of thing. So it's a way of engaging with my work where I'm just like, I want to really reward this someday. And I know I can do that with the story, but I do want to find people and say like, you thought good. Very, very, very good. So it for me, it's nothing less than a celebration. I never ever feel, I think the only thing that I ever feel that's kind of this sense of like, oh no, is like I've got a couple spoilers that are very, very obvious and people have guessed them, and I'm probably going to tell people about them, and give them the answers a little sooner than I thought. But the one big one, like, people have kind of half guessed it, and I've been like, oh no, that's the one that I don't want anybody to know until like right at the moment. But at the same time, I have to step back and just be like, that's amazing. That's really, really cool of people to piece those things together. It's a game. It's a really cool game, and I feel like I'm making something that people know how to play, and I freaking love that. It's so fun. So I have never understood the whole thing about, oh, I have to change it now because somebody guessed it. I could not be further from that. I just want to get to that plot point faster if somebody does guess it, because then I want to confirm it and give them a little prize.
If only we all got prizes when we guessed something right. That would just make consuming content so much more exciting. But yeah, I'm in the same boat as all y'all seem to be. I just don't think that if someone guesses your spoiler, that it is cause to change your plot. I mean, unless you're like looking for a reason to change your plot, then okay. But I don't think it means you have to. I agree with Crispy and Clam that it means you're doing something right, that you're leading the readers in the right direction, and you're not just giving them a puzzle with all the wrong pieces that they somehow have to put together. I know as a like reader and like in movies when I'm reading things, I love guessing at what's happening, and I love when I get it right. I love if I am watching a movie and I get it right. And why would I take that away from readers of my comic? If they are guessing it right, they deserve to feel good about themselves for getting it right.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I kind of like, Miranda saying some of that, especially with like some of the writers feeling like they have to rewrite things. I think that a little bit too much enthusiasm is left on the twists of things, and you shouldn't have to rely on that a twist for your story to kind of being like, that's a twist, that's another twist, like, you don't have to rely on those being points of making your story good. Like, twists are fun and all, but not everything has to be a twist either. So definitely do with like what Thane was saying early on with like, you can reveal some new outfits that are going to come along the line, as long as it's not like, oh my goodness, a faction change. I think it's cool to start to kind of lead these directions and whatnot, and let the reader wander. I think it's just, I think about what's going on with a lot of TV production where they read like Reddit or whatever and pay attention to what people are guessing. I don't think that's a good idea. Your story's not going to have that longevity that it needs. It's not going to have rewatchability. It's just going to be twist after twist after twist, and then you can only watch it or digest it once.
And I so agree. I think that we would all have whiplash and be really dizzy if every single part of a
Mm-hmm.
story was twisted.
Yes,
So
I like
it
that you said
definitely doesn't
whiplash.
need to be. Well, at first it was just dizzy, but it would also
No,
be a little whiplashy. So
that's
it's
so
a good
good.
mix.
That's so good.
I think you run into kind of a conundrum with that, where if you do start a webcomic and so many twists are everywhere, then people are going to just keep looking for twists everywhere. Like,
Yes.
what if the team just goes on a beach vacation one day? What does it mean?
Yeah.
Like, like you have to. What does the like? I've had people, question like, Claire, you give all your characters long earrings. Why do you like long earrings? And I'm like, I want to tell them I dislike long earrings, but they're just like, what does it mean? It has to mean something. And I'm just like, no, please go to bed. It's okay.
The
Like, I
number
love
of
it, and
pancakes,
oh my gosh,
the
yeah.
number of
So
pancakes
you
Pavel eats is a metaphor or something.
I mean, I'm waiting for the essays. Sure, go for it if you want to.
Yeah, on that note, I feel like it is totally possible to write yourself into like a twisty corner if you just try to predict and outsmart the readers at every turn that you go through. And there's some types of stories that can get away with that sort of thing. I feel like if you're writing just a general ongoing like soap opera style or like comedy story that doesn't have a specific driving thrust to the story, then you can kind of throw in whatever new thing you want and like change gears at a moment's notice. But like if you were writing a story that has a driving theme and a plot and you're trying to go in a direction that feels guided and is building towards some solid core like message or meaning or like a thematic direction, and you like change gears three-quarters of the way through your story because somebody guessed your ending, like you're gonna hurt your story outright because all of that buildup is now like just wasted. Like there is a certain skill, like you can to some extent build that new ending so that it still fits into the foreshadowing. Because as I was working on my first comic, Chiralt, I kind of had to do that repeatedly. Like I did throw away outlines and find new ways to end it. But it was because I personally had thought of a better way to tell the story that I was doing. It wasn't because my readers had guessed it or something like that. Like that's an external force acting on your story. And you don't have to you don't have to listen to that sort of thing. You should follow like your own personal vision and tell the story that you actually are trying to tell, and not the story that like Reddit wants or doesn't want you to tell. um, so I mean, needless to say, I also love it when readers guess what I was going for. Like if they guess something correctly in my comments, I won't reply to it and be like, "Yes, you're right," if the moment hasn't come yet. But I do feel very good on the inside. Maybe I'll reply with an emoji of like rubbing my hands together or something like that. But yeah, I think it's great.
I love the rubbing hands together emoji, but I just want to emphasize that I definitely agree. Whatever you're writing should be written for you, and if you're changing it just because someone thought of what was going to happen and just like figured it out, if you change it, you're not writing it for yourself anymore, and you probably won't enjoy it as much.
And not to mention that a majority of stories are derivative. Like, this is not me being gonna slam your hopes and dreams, but like nothing is original, but it's the journey getting there that makes it original. So even if someone does guess, the big shabam about your story, it's still the journey, um, going there that is gonna be the different aspect of that.
I mean, tropes work for a reason.
Yes.
Like people like tropes. Some folks will use it as a pejorative, like, oh, it's tropey or it's cliche or something like that. But when you really get down to it, often that is what brings people to a story.
Hmm.
I have an unashamed weakness for stories that involve like a superpowered evil side to a character. So I'll gravitate towards things that include that. I'll go on TV tropes and I'll read through like all the linked stories that include that. And like if I see a set of plot points in those tropes for a work, I'll be like, hell yeah, this is my kind of thing. Like I can tell I'm gonna like this.
Hi, everyone. This is Delphina hopping in with a super quick note to let you know that I've just released all 3 Somnambulist books back on my site in one big bundle. So if you're new to my comic, want to check it out, go to somnambulist.com/store and get all caught up. There's PDF and print versions, and I've also got a few punny gifts if you like D&D or coffee or just really, really terrible jokes. Somnambulist.com/store, all there. Check them out. Thanks for listening.
So this leads into the fourth question, which is how do you promote your comic if a major spoiler is a core part of the appeal?
So, thinking about promoting your comic if like a major spoiler is kind of like the central point of it. I think like when comics have that huge reliance on something so big and something that you obviously can't be like, it's about this. I would usually focus on, promoting the characters or the world or whatever to kind of lead it, or even promoting like the atmosphere that you have for it, things to come, and small events, because there are stories that definitely have that kind of need for that one spoiler to be what the whole thing is. I, it, those stories usually are the ones that you don't have the rereadability or the rewatchability for movies. um to kind of have, like, I guess, like, survival ones. It's just like, did they make it? You won't know until you watch it. And if someone did say, oh, they did survive at the end, it kind of does ruin the experience. So again, I would just kind of try to promote the atmosphere, or the world that it encompasses, or a theme, and a feeling, or something like that. Go with something a little bit more ambiguous, but still kind of encompassing to your story.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing something abstract as much as you can, because I really feel for stories that you might not know going into them that there's going to be a particular spoiler, but then suddenly something happens and everybody's talking about it, and you're like, oh gosh, so yeah, that's going to be the way that comic is marketed now. And it can be good in one way, it can be bad in another way. I think, I don't know. If you're going right from the beginning, and there's one thing that is going to hook readers, I would do your best to not spoil it. Like, it's still going to give you that big wham factor when it does hit, but I think you can still get away with, like, yeah, abstract images, or yeah, feeling a tone. Like, I have a lot of us have comics with characters that have like true forms, and we don't want to show that true form, but we can kind of, yeah, give a feeling of it, put it in a poster, put it in a background. um I don't want to reveal the full extent of that form until a certain point, but I can show hints of it so that people can be like, oh, okay, this is something that's coming. I don't know everything about it, but it's giving me a feeling that I really like. And I might, there's certain things I keep closer to the vest than others, but for that, I feel like if you can pinpoint something in your work that is going to be something that makes people go, whoa, I'm going to recommend this to all my friends, like, try and use that as vaguely as you can, because I think there is a way to harness it early in advance. I think it's just going to depend on what it is, if it's something visual or if it's like words, or like, if it is a whole story point, you can still do a lot with that. I think there's a cool puzzle to solve there, where you've got this ammunition that you want to use, but it's the big gun, and you're like, I can't fire it yet, but I can kind of set it sparking and tell people, like, something's coming, it's going to be cool, but I can't tell you everything yet. I think you can market it that way. It's just going to depend a lot on what it is, and you're going to have to sit down and be like, what can I get away with? What's the furthest I can go where somebody can be like, I want to read this comic, but they don't know why they want to read the comic.
I definitely think you have to think about it before you post. Set up your, like, if you can use hints to be the really long fuse for the bomb that's going to go off, that definitely helps. There's Crispy, Thane, Claire, they've all had great ideas, like showing off future outfit changes, scenery, things like that. I feel like a good thing about comics is you can often separate the art from the dialogue and the text. And sometimes if you remove one or the other, it can make something that would be a spoiler be less of a spoiler just by taking it out of that context. So showing a snippet of something out of the blue without its surroundings may allow you to share something about it, tease the idea, but people aren't going to know where it's going to fall into the comic. So they will want to keep reading and will want to see, oh, where does this puzzle piece fit in? So I think that's a really good way to go. I think it just comes down to think about anything before you post it. Like, take the time to see how big this little chunk is in your story before you share something about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, like how to talk about a comic when something that I consider a pivotal part of the story's appeal is related to something that hasn't happened in the future. In For the comic that I finished in the past, Gerald, I freely spoil the heck out of it, because, I mean, I don't really have to worry about like a story event that I haven't put in yet, but I do still have, if a new person is coming to the story, I have to figure out what to say about it. But honestly, probably one of the biggest spoilers in the story is something that I do consider like one of the most interesting bits of it. And maybe that's going to be the most effective marketing tool that I have to bring new people to the story that I have. With Witchwood, I try to keep certain upcoming plot points a secret, but as soon as they happen, I am absolutely going to be using them in all of my tweets because I feel like it'll do a better job at bringing in more readers than some of the stuff that's already happened.
I feel like just because I know, my story is basically chopped into 3 acts, and at the end of act, or I guess, yeah, end of act two and the beginning of act two, there are 2 spoilers, and I kind of want to. I have a log line in the back of my head that is like the alternate log line for when I pass those spoilers. Because right now I'm just like, oh, it's a story about this and this and this. But then I know when I get to that point, I can more freely market it as this story is actually about this. And it's still not a spoiler because you're still not telling people the whole shebang. But for readers that are not at that point yet and don't want to be spoiled on where that sort of story twist happens, I like having kind of a pre twist and a post twist sort of selling point on that front. It's going to be interesting for me to figure out what's best about that.
And like that's the really interesting part about like web comics is because like it's kind of coming along, it's getting released slowly, readers are kind of there as it's being created. So it's a really good point when you do reach a certain point of the story, like Thane and Clam said, you're going to be like, okay, this character has been revealed. Now this is going to be in my marketing. Now this is going to be like, haha, you're going to be seeing this more as I promote it. And I think that's just really interesting to see how like the story evolves, not only as its, narrative kind of facet, but like also the marketing facet, to kind of pay attention to that. And then you will draw more readers in with that intrigue. So technically something that you would have considered a spoiler when it wasn't released in the comic, now you're still quote unquote spoiling it for people who don't know, but it's an intrigue now because you have the build up.
Yeah, sometimes the most interesting thing about a major plot beat that is a spoiler is not necessarily the fact of the event itself, but all the brand new questions that it opens up for the reader. Like all these exciting new, like the implications of it, the consequences. You want to know how this is going to affect the characters after the fact. I feel like that can be some of the most interesting stuff, almost more so than like just the details of like what you could say about what happened. Um, so, we've been talking about revealing spoilers along the way as writers. This next question, which is treading a little bit into story structure territory, but when do you decide when it's time to do a reveal?
So as far as like revealing that the spoiler or plot, I like to keep it as close to itself unraveling during the natural progression of the plot as possible, just for that experience. But there are definitely times that I like to kind of reveal before it happens, again to kind of drop that intrigue. Not everything can be done that way, though. Something specific, as far as an example, comes from my own comic, Ghost Young Sickness. We had a character that we had waited a very long time to reveal that was actually a major player in the story itself. So, writing this comic, we were in 5 years keeping our mouths shut that this character was a pivotal, moment of game changing. And it was good not to say anything or give any hints, throw any promotional images that would have kind of like hinted at there being something else, as like, beyond what the story has said. Because when that character revealed themselves to be who they are, the lead up to it with readers guessing, something that, it wasn't, definitely made me rub my hands together like this little like gremlin being like, haha, you don't know what's about to hit you kind of thing. And then we went kind of hog wild on the reveal page. We had animated it, and I think it was just like definitely one of the biggest well received moments in the comic. So I think like that's really important to kind of be like, what is the reveal that's going to be something that I need this secrecy towards? So it definitely matters on like, what you're trying to build up to kind of get to that point. Like what is something in your story that you're just like, I need the build up to get as juicy and as, mysterious as possible so that this reveal is amazing. Now, I wouldn't consider everything in your story to have that because Miranda had said earlier in the podcast that kind of creates a little bit of a whiplash if you're waiting for everything to be a twist. So there's definitely moments where you're just like, okay, now I'm going to, as the writer, kind of reveal bigger moments in the story that really, really work as that intrigue. We had left some, pretty quote unquote major spoilers for some of the main characters where they were going and whatnot, so that people were just like, wait, what does this mean? And kind of just getting intrigued that way. So that when it got to that point, you're just like, okay, this is something to look forward to. So, you know, don't hold on to all the secrets that you have because um, sometimes it doesn't give people as much to look forward to. I know speaking to some creators in the webcomic community kind of keep everything a secret, and you're just like, I understand, but I'm not as intrigued as you might hope if you're doing this way. Like, when I think of a character or, a possible, way that the story might go, and you're just constantly like, nah, it doesn't, it doesn't intrigue me as a reader, to be quite honest. Like, give a little bit of something to look forward to, even if it's just, going into that spoiler territory a little bit.
I feel the same. There are some people that I know in the community that they're sitting on a gold mine of some sort of marketing opportunity. I don't want to boil it all down to marketing, but if you want eyes on your webcomic, you are going to have to share a little bit of what's coming. So there are some people where I know that they're very precious about things that they don't want to talk about. Like this is like a no man's zone. Like they're not even going to go there. And I look at what's in there if they do, share it with me or share, whips, or if I do beta reading for somebody, I can kind of be like, this is a really cool thing that people will not really, they won't understand it, but that's actually to your advantage. It's something that it looks really cool, or it's mysterious, or like people that are already familiar with the story would, kind of go, oh, what's this? And, try and drag other people into the story so they can talk about it. It's something where I think it's worth talking about your story with other people to get that opinion of like, what could you use? What could you give up that's not your most precious spoiler that could still help you a lot? Because I know that for me, I'm in a position now where I wanted to reveal certain things much later, but I am going to reveal certain things sooner just because I know how it feels now to wait for an answer that I already have. and it drives me crazy. Like there's certain shows or movies where I'm just like, I know exactly what's happening here. Please just give it to me. And not everybody is like that, but I know that I want to push that upward, because if I'm producing 1 to 2 pages a week, it's going to be a long time before I get there, and I might, some readers might get a little bit bored. And I want to reward people. I want to give them certain things that I might have wanted to hold on to, but I'm also like, you're sticking around through kind of a lull sometimes. How about I give you this nugget as a reward, and have them be like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you. And then they can go and be like, guys, come on in, read this comic with me. I need to talk to somebody about it. So I think there's a huge aspect of, look at the elements that make up your story. If there's one thing that you think would look really cool on a poster, or would be awesome to put into your log line, or into your little mini pitch if you're telling it to a friend, like, you don't hide it. It's okay. Like, there are certain things that you can't do, but if you can find something to put into your pitch that is just super strong, and everybody around you agrees, like, this is a cool thing and it could make your entire project just soar, like, don't be afraid. It's so good to do that.
I think that's especially important in web comics because the majority of them, maybe not the majority, but a lot of them are really long form, and it is going to take a long time to get through the story just with the posting frequency. And you need to keep your readers interested. Your readers need to feel like they are getting something out of reading your comic. I feel like I keep falling into like metaphors today, but like a mystery, you don't solve a mystery by going straight from the crime scene to the killer in a murder mystery. You find clues along the way, and you need to give these clues to your readers. They need to be able to pick up these pieces along the way, know that they're meaningful, know that they're for something and there for a reason, so that they can get through the story and feel rewarded along the way. And I think that's really important. It's something I enjoy as a reader, and it's something I want to give my readers so that they can enjoy reading my comic.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely don't think it's a good idea to keep too many secrets from the readers because honestly, what secrets usually are payoff. It's like that sense of reward that the reader gets when a plot point has been like carried through or addressed in some way. So if you get if folks get too caught up in the idea of having a cool reveal, it can make them put things off kind of indefinitely because they're like, oh, it's not the right time yet. It's not the right time. And doing that too many times in a row can make a story feel kind of vague and unsatisfying. I personally, this is my personal opinion, but I got a bit frustrated in season 1 of Attack on Titan because there was this pattern of a plot event, a major question being set up in the plot, and then the characters would be fighting their way towards it. It was so intense and like emotional and stuff. And just when it seemed like they were about to get the answer to the question, like it would just get pulled completely out from under their feet, and suddenly you're like, oh, that question doesn't matter anymore. We have a new question now. But the original one was never actually addressed at all. It just kind of eventually ceases to be relevant, or by the time it actually does get answered much later, you like don't the reader doesn't really care like about what it was that was happening. And sometimes this can be a symptom of the creator like just genuinely not having planned that far ahead. Like if you legitimately just don't know what that plot beat is going to look like when you get there, maybe folks are trying to play for time sometimes, because you need that space to figure out where you're going. And for people, I know a lot of webcomic creators and probably other storytellers in general, a lot of us are inspired by animation or TV or like big movies and stuff like that. And the tricky thing is that a lot of these shows, like Avatar: The Last Airbender or something, they were made over years by hundreds of people working together and many different writers contributing, and they have like a solid episodic structure. And so when you look at like season one of Avatar, and like they don't start, maybe they reveal something about the backstory of one of the main characters and it's like 3/4 of the way through the season, that's a lot of runtime. It took a lot of people a ton of time to make that. And as a solo creator, if you try to imitate the scope of that kind of story, it's going to take forever. So if your instincts are kind of honed by that type of story and you have this kind of vague gut feeling that like, oh, I can't reveal that right away, it needs more space before that. Just like evaluate your medium and the kind of story that you're trying to tell, because the impact of a reveal does not correlate to how long people have waited for it. It's more about like the right buildup having taken place beforehand. So I try to opt to put my reveals in sooner rather than later, because as I mentioned earlier in one of the other questions, it can often be much more interesting to show the consequences of a major plot beat or spoiler instead of being too precious about like, oh, I can't show people that yet. Um, just my preferences anyway.
This is a huge thing that I thought about going into my story structure, where I wanted all my spoilers to happen, yeah, basically in the second act, like a couple things in the third act maybe, but I wanted everybody to have those big moments in the second act, and then I have a whole third act where all the characters and hopefully the audience is just going to be like, so what do we do with this? Like, how do we deal with it? How do we solve it? But there's a lot of time to kind of mull over just what it all means, because if it I oh gosh, I there's nothing that hurts me more than an anime or a movie or a show where they reveal something in the last like episode that nobody was considering, and then they have to solve it in the last episode too. Like there's no time for it to sink in, or have people write theories about it and get really excited about it. It's just like, here's the problem, here's the solution. And it's like, oh, okay, there it is. Like I it's I really want to avoid that. I love the idea of you present the conflict or you present the spoiler, and then there's a huge kind of a decompression of that, and that's where some really cool things can happen.
Yeah, you want to be able to actually unpack it more fully, and that can be like super great when you drop these big, like a status quo change, maybe something major happens in the world building, or a character based reveal. Someone makes a big decision that they've been building up to all season. It can be so cool to see that happen, not early per se, but like around the midpoint of the story instead of at the very end. um, just because sometimes it's fun to see the denouement. What are the
And
consequences?
we kind of talk a lot about like rewarding the reader with like things along the way, and I think that's just something try to keep in mind when writing something as long-winded as webcomics, because it takes such a long time to make, and as a reader to kind of see it through. Like, reward your readers with these like small little revelations and stuff like that, or little oohs and ahs and stuff about your story, and maybe even bump up your big reveals for things so that it does come sooner, because it is a long time to get there. And like Thane said, like you are just 1 to 2 people. You're not this giant powerful studio that has hundreds of people to get to a point. So think about your time creating as well as the readers.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very, very important. um anyway, that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for listening. I've been your host, Verathane or Ali, and you can check out my work at chiralt.sevensmith.net or at witchwoodcomic.com.
I'm Crispy. You can check out my work at ghostjunksickness.com.
I am Claire, and you can check out my work at phantommarine.com.
And I'm Miranda, and you can check out my work at intotheswellcomic.com.
Comus.
See you next time, slappers.
Spoilers?
Thank you so much for listening to Screen Tones. Please subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to also follow us on Twitter at ScreenTonesCast.